Hello and welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Executive Editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Pennsylvania editor Kristen Smith is taking some time off this week, so I'm joining the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. The natural gas industry is one that's important to Pennsylvania in terms of jobs, energy production, the economy in general. But we've seen some stagnant production in this state, particularly when you compare Pennsylvania's natural gas production to some other states that also produce natural gas. What's going on here?
Yeah, so that is the question, and it really depends who you ask for the interpretation here. When we're looking at it, last year Pennsylvania had its highest payout from its impact fee, which is essentially a tax on Pennsylvania's natural gas industry, sent out about $279 million, which was a new high and a 20% increase from last year. However, a couple weeks after the fact, the Independent Fiscal Office told us that for next year, it expects about a $100 million decline in those fees. So some of this comes from the aging of the wells and how the impact fee is structured, where you kind of get these peak payouts about 4, 5, 6 years in before it starts declining. But even when we're looking at the actual natural gas production, we're starting to see a drop in Pennsylvania. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, productivity declines and limits on natural gas takeaway capacity resulted in a 0.4 billion cubic feet per day decrease in Pennsylvania's production in 2022. This is also a historical change because until last year, output had increased every year since 2013, basically driven by drilling efficiency gains. When we're looking at the highest producing counties in Pennsylvania, which are Susquehanna, Washington, Bradford, and Greene, they had a 3% production decline overall, and only Greene County saw a very slight increase. So when you talk to industry from them, we're hearing the problem here is kind of two things. One is our permitting delays and issues of being given clearance to put up drill new wells. And the other problem is basically we're maxing out on our pipeline capacity. So we're not able to move necessarily as much natural gas around the state or out of state to other states as could be possible, but we're just not building more pipelines. When you look at other states, that is not the picture. When we look at the Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico, production there has increased 14% compared to 2021. We've also seen gains in Louisiana. And basically, a lot of these other places, you're seeing more pipeline construction going in, and that seems to be helping them. But Pennsylvania is not necessarily following in those footsteps.
Well, I guess I can understand the pipeline capacity if they're maxing out, et cetera. But this permitting concern, I mean, these national gas producing states like Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, they have to go through federal permitting as well to build new wells, to expand pipelines, et cetera. So that part of it, I don't know. Is it state regulations, state permitting processes, or they're just getting more hung up in the federal process?
Yeah, so when you speak with the industry, they argue that it is a state level problem. One thing that comes up every year when the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is up for their appropriations hearing, we hear complaints that they are not issuing enough permits to allow companies to drill on publicly owned lands like this. Not necessarily parks, but state lands, forests, some other things that historically are open to drilling, to lumbering, that sort of thing. So the argument from industry is that there's all this this red tape issue of not approving enough permits where we could boost production, but the state is saying no to that. On the other hand, what you hear from DCNR and some environmental groups is this is more an issue with natural gas prices, where compared to last year, we've seen a decline in those. And basically, there's some wells where when you have lower prices, it's not necessarily profitable to ramp up production or drill these new wells. They also point to the argument that when you look at DCNR permits, something like 2/3 of the permits issued have not actually seen any action taken on them. So the stance from some state agencies and environmental groups are that it's not so much permits. The permits have been issued. This industry is not drilling these new wells because the profit margins aren't necessarily there. And also, I heard from Penn Future where their senior director of energy and climate, Rob Altenberg, basically argued that you're seeing more competition from renewable resources such as wind, solar, what have you, where those prices are as competitive to produce new energy. And that's also why you're not necessarily seeing as much investment in natural gas.
And you're also getting government subsidies in those so-called greener energy. So taxpayers are subsidizing growth in wind energy, solar energy, et cetera. So just to close, Anthony, what's the real world implications of this production stagnancy for Pennsylvanians, for the state economy, for energy across the United States? Because Pennsylvania's natural gas, of course, is used by Pennsylvanians, but it's also used by Americans across the country.
Yeah, so that's a big question. Essentially, Pennsylvania still looks like it will remain the second largest producer of natural gas in the United States, behind Texas, but ahead of Louisiana. But when we're kind of looking long term here, this shale boom that really started in the late 2000s, early 2010s, a lot of these wells that are the ones sending the most impact fee revenues to the state government and also county level and local governments. It seems like, at least in the short term, we're going to see some declines on there. So if you're in one of those counties that relies on impact fee revenues to cover, basic budget costs or future investments, things like that, it might behoove you to start asking some questions to your township supervisors, county commissioners of, what do we expect over these next few years and how are we going to pay for local government services?
Listeners can keep up with this story and all Pennsylvania news stories at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, I'm Dan McCaleb. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe.